Have you ever felt like you're living someone else's life? Like you're following a script that was handed to you, but deep down, you know it's not quite right? Well, what if I told you that you could design your life like a product designer creates an innovative gadget? Intrigued? Stay tuned, because today we're diving into a book that might just change the way you look at your career, your future, and your entire life. Welcome, movers and shakers, to another episode of CEO's Library, the 1% Bookshelf. I'm your host, and I'm thrilled to have you join me on this journey through the minds of the world's most influential thinkers. Today, we're exploring a book that's been making waves in both the business world and beyond. It's called Designing Your Life: How to Build a Well-Lived, Joyful Life by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, this doesn't sound like a typical business book. And you'd be right, but stick with me, because the principles in this book have the power to revolutionize not just your career, but your entire approach to life. Burnett and Evans aren't your typical self-help gurus. They're Stanford professors who have taken the principles of design thinking, a methodology used to create innovative products and services, and applied them to the most important project of all, your life. It's a fresh, practical approach that's been transforming lives in their wildly popular Stanford course, and now, through this book, it's available to all of us. So buckle up, listeners. We're about to embark on a journey that could change the way you think about your future, your career, and what it means to live a truly fulfilling life. Let's kick things off with a question that I want you to really sit with for a moment. Have you ever felt stuck in your career or life? As maybe you've achieved everything you thought you wanted, but still feel unfulfilled. Or perhaps you're at a crossroads, unsure of which path to take next. If you're nodding your head right now, you're not alone. In fact, you're in very good company. Burnett and Evans open their book with a stark reality. The way most of us approach career planning is fundamentally flawed. They argue that traditional career planning often fails because it's based on a series of misconceptions about how the world works and how humans make decisions. Think about it. How many of us were told to follow our passion or find our calling? It sounds great in theory, but here's the kicker. Research shows that only about 20% of people have a single, clear passion that they can build a career around. For the rest of us, passion is something that develops over time, often as a result of the work we do, not as a precursor to it. And then there's the pressure to have it all figured out. We're expected to know exactly what we want to do with our lives, often before we've had a chance to experience much of the world. It's like trying to choose a meal from a menu written in a language you don't understand. How can you know what you'll enjoy if you haven't tasted it yet? This is where Burnett and Evans propose a radical shift in thinking. Instead of trying to plan out your entire life or career in advance, they suggest approaching it like a designer would approach creating a new product. Designers don't sit around waiting for the perfect idea to strike. They generate lots of ideas, prototype them, test them out in the real world, and iterate based on what they learn. Imagine applying this same process to your life and career. Instead of agonizing over making the right choice, you'd be constantly experimenting, learning, and adjusting course based on real-world feedback. It's a more dynamic, flexible approach that acknowledges a simple truth. The only constant in life is change. But here's where it gets really interesting. The authors argue that this design thinking approach isn't just about finding a better job or career. It's about designing a life that's personally meaningful, joyful, and fulfilling. It's about creating a life where your work, your play, your love, and your health all align in a way that feels authentically you. Now, I can almost hear some of you thinking, that sounds great, but is it really possible? The authors would argue not only is it possible, but it's necessary in today's rapidly changing world. The idea of a single, linear career path is becoming increasingly obsolete. We're living longer, changing jobs more frequently, and facing technological disruptions that are reshaping entire industries. In this context, the ability to design and redesign your life becomes not just a nice-to-have skill, but an essential one. So, as we dive deeper into the insights from this book, I want you to keep this overarching idea in mind. Your life is not a problem to be solved, but a creative adventure to be designed. And you, my friend, are the designer. Now that we've set the stage, let's dive into one of the most powerful concepts in designing your life. The idea of reframing dysfunctional beliefs. This is where things start to get really transformative, so pay close attention. Burnett and Evans argue that many of us are held back not by our circumstances, but by our beliefs about those circumstances. These beliefs act like invisible barriers, limiting our options and stifling our creativity before we even get started. The authors call these dysfunctional beliefs, and learning to identify and reframe them is a crucial step in designing a life you love. Let's start with a common one. I should know where I'm going in life. How many of us have felt the pressure of this belief? We think that if we don't have a clear, detailed plan for our future, we're somehow falling behind or doing something wrong. But here's how the authors suggest reframing this belief. I can't know where I'm going until I know where I am. This reframe is powerful because it shifts our focus from an imaginary future to our present reality. It encourages us to start by understanding ourselves, our values, our strengths, our interests, rather than trying to predict an unknowable future. It's about building a compass to navigate by, rather than trying to map out every step of the journey in advance. Here's another dysfunctional belief that might hit close to home for many of us. To be happy, I need to make the right choice. This belief can be paralyzing, causing us to agonize over decisions and fear making mistakes. The reframe? There is no right choice, only good choosing. This reframe liberates us from the pressure of trying to predict the perfect outcome. Instead, it focuses us on the process of making decisions, gathering information, and learning from our experiences. It acknowledges that life is a journey of continuous learning and adjustment, not a single high-stakes decision. Let me share a personal story that illustrates the power of this reframe. A few years ago, I was agonizing over whether to take a new job offer. It was a great opportunity, but it would mean moving to a new city and leaving behind a team I loved. I was paralyzed by the fear of making the wrong choice. Then I came across this idea of good choosing rather than right choices. It completely shifted my perspective. Instead of trying to predict which choice would make me happier in the long run, an impossible task, I focused on making a well-informed decision based on my current values and goals. I took the job, and while it certainly had its challenges, the experience taught me so much about myself and opened up opportunities I never could have predicted. The key was that I stopped seeing it as a single, life-defining choice and started seeing it as one step in an ongoing process of designing my life. Now let's look at one more dysfunctional belief that's particularly relevant in our achievement-oriented culture. I should have a passion and I should pursue it. This belief can be incredibly frustrating for those who don't feel they have a clear, all-consuming passion. The reframe? Passion is the result of good life design, not the cause. This reframe is liberating because it takes the pressure off finding your one true calling before you can start living a fulfilling life. Instead, it suggests that passion often develops as we engage with the world, try new things, and discover what truly energizes us. It's about action and experience, not just introspection. The power of these reframes lies in how they open up possibilities. When we let go of the belief that we should have it all figured out, or that there's one right path for us, we become free to explore, experiment, and evolve. We become designers of our own lives rather than passive recipients of whatever comes our way. So, I challenge you, listeners, to examine your own beliefs about career and life. What assumptions are you making that might be holding you back? What stories are you telling yourself about what's possible or impossible? Remember, the first step in designing a life you love is believing that it's possible to do so. In the coming sections, we'll explore more practical tools for putting these reframes into action. But for now, I want you to sit with this idea. Your beliefs shape your reality. By reframing limiting beliefs, you can open up a world of possibilities you might never have considered before. And that, my friends, is where the exciting work of life design truly begins. Now that we've talked about reframing our beliefs, let's dive into one of the most practical and powerful tools that Burnett and Evans introduce: the concept of prototyping your life. This is where the rubber meets the road in life design, and it's a game changer for how we approach career and life decisions. In product design, a prototype is a quick, rough version of a product that allows designers to test their ideas in the real world. It's not about getting it perfect. It's about learning fast and iterating. Now imagine applying this same principle to your life and career choices. That's exactly what Burnett and Evans suggest we do. The authors argue that instead of trying to think our way into the perfect life or career, we should be building our way forward through small experiments or prototypes. These prototypes allow us to test our ideas about what we might enjoy or be good at without having to commit to a major life change. Let me give you an example to illustrate this. Say you've always been curious about working in the non-profit sector, but you're hesitant to leave your current job in finance. A traditional approach might be to agonize over the decision, weighing pros and cons endlessly. The prototyping approach would be different. You might volunteer at a non-profit for a few hours a week, take on a short-term consulting project in the sector, or even shadow someone in a non-profit role for a day. These are all low-risk ways to gather real-world data about whether this career move might be right for you. You're not just thinking about it, you're experiencing it in small doses. And here's the key: you're doing this while still maintaining your current job and lifestyle. You're not burning bridges, you're building new pathways. The beauty of this approach is that it takes a lot of the pressure off. You're not trying to make one big, life-altering decision. Instead, you're gathering information through experience, which allows you to make more informed choices over time. Burnett and Evans emphasize the importance of failing fast in this process. In the world of design, failure isn't seen as a setback, it's seen as valuable information. If a prototype doesn't work out the way you expected, that's not a personal failure. It's just data. Maybe you discover that while you love the mission of non-profits, you find the day-to-day work less engaging than you hoped. That's incredibly useful information that you couldn't have gotten just by thinking about it. Let me share another personal anecdote to drive this point home. A few years ago, I thought I might want to start my own business. It was a daunting prospect, and I was paralyzed by the fear of failure. And then I came across this idea of prototyping, and it changed everything. Instead of quitting my job and diving in headfirst, I started small. I took on a few freelance projects on the side. I attended networking events for entrepreneurs. I even set up a small online store to test out my business idea. Some of these prototypes were more successful than others, but each one taught me something valuable. I learned that I loved the creative aspects of running a business, but found the administrative tasks draining. I discovered that I thrived on collaboration, which made me rethink my initial plan of being a solopreneur. These insights helped me refine my vision and ultimately led me to co-found a business with a partner whose strengths complemented mine. The key was that I didn't have to risk everything to learn these lessons. By creating small, low-risk prototypes, I was able to gather real-world data that informed my decisions. And perhaps most importantly, I was able to move forward despite my fears because each step felt manageable. This approach of prototyping and failing fast also helps to build what the authors call failure immunity. When you see failure not as a devastating setback, but as a normal part of the design process, it becomes much less scary. You become more resilient, more willing to take risks, and ultimately more likely to stumble upon opportunities and paths that truly resonate with you. So I challenge you, listeners, to think about what areas of your life or career you might want to prototype. What small experiments could you run to test out your ideas or curiosities? Remember, it doesn't have to be big or dramatic. It could be as simple as taking a class, starting a side project, or having a conversation with someone in a field you're curious about. The goal isn't to make a perfect choice, but to gather information through experience. By prototyping your life, you're not just dreaming about possibilities, you're actively exploring them. And in doing so, you're designing a life that's uniquely tailored to you. Now that we've explored the power of reframing beliefs and prototyping experiences, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. After all, the ultimate goal of life design isn't just to find a satisfying career, it's to create a well-lived, joyful life. This is where Burnett and Evans really challenge us to think differently about what success and fulfillment really mean. One of the most powerful ideas in the book is their perspective on work-life balance. Now, I know what you're thinking. Work-life balance, hasn't that concept been talked to death? But hear me out, because their take on it is refreshingly different. Instead of seeing work and life as two separate entities that need to be balanced, the authors encourage us to see them as integrated parts of a whole. They introduce the concept of work-life harmony rather than balance. The idea is that a well-designed life isn't about equally dividing your time between work and personal life, but about creating a life where all aspects, work, play, love, and health, are in harmony with each other. Think about it like this. When an orchestra is in harmony, it doesn't mean all instruments are playing at the same volume all the time. Sometimes the strings take center stage, sometimes it's the percussion. But when it all comes together, it creates something beautiful. Your life can be the same way. This shift in perspective is liberating because it acknowledges that there will be times when work takes more of your energy and times when personal life does. The key is not perfect balance at every moment, but overall harmony over time. But how do we achieve this harmony? This is where the authors emphasize the importance of aligning your work with your values and interests. They introduce a concept called work view, which is essentially your philosophy of work. What role does work play in your life? What defines good or worthwhile work for you? Understanding your work view is crucial because it helps you make decisions that align with your values rather than just chasing external markers of success. Let me share a personal example to illustrate this. Early in my career, I was solely focused on climbing the corporate ladder. I worked long hours, took on every project I could, and measured my success by my job title and salary. But despite achieving what I thought was success, I felt unfulfilled and burnt out. It wasn't until I took a step back and really examined my work view that I realized the disconnect. Deep down, I valued creativity, continuous learning, and making a positive impact more than I valued status or financial success alone. Once I understood this, I was able to make career decisions that aligned better with these values. I moved into a role that allowed me to be more creative and have a more direct impact on people's lives. The result? Work became energizing rather than draining, and I felt a greater sense of purpose and fulfillment. This brings us to another key point the authors make: the importance of incorporating more joy and meaning into daily life. They argue that a well-designed life isn't just about big achievements or major life events. It's about finding joy and meaning in the everyday. One tool they suggest for this is the Good Time Journal. This involves keeping track of when you feel engaged and energized throughout your day, both at work and in your personal life. By doing this, you start to notice patterns. What activities light you up? When do you find yourself in a state of flow? This information becomes invaluable as you design your life, helping you make choices that incorporate more of these energizing activities. For instance, you might notice that you feel most engaged when you're problem-solving in a team, or when you're mentoring younger colleagues. Armed with this knowledge, you can look for ways to incorporate more of these activities into your work, or even explore career paths that heavily feature these elements. But it's not just about work. The authors emphasize the importance of play in a well-designed life. They define play as any activity that brings you joy simply in the doing of it. It could be playing a sport, creating art, gardening, or even solving puzzles. The key is that it's not about the outcome, but about the enjoyment of the process itself. Incorporating more play into your life isn't just about having fun, although that's certainly a benefit. It's about recharging your batteries, stimulating creativity, and maintaining a sense of curiosity and wonder about the world. In our achievement-oriented culture, play often gets pushed to the sidelines, but in a well-designed life, it's a crucial component. Now, I can almost hear some of you thinking, this all sounds great, but I have bills to pay and responsibilities to meet. I can't just focus on what brings me joy all the time. And you're absolutely right. The authors aren't suggesting we all quit our jobs to pursue our hobbies full-time. What they are suggesting is that we become more intentional about incorporating elements that bring us joy and energy into our lives, even in small ways. Let me give you a personal example of how this can work. A few years ago, I realized that I felt most energized when I was learning new things and sharing knowledge with others. At the time, my job didn't involve much of either of these activities. Instead of immediately looking for a new job, I started small. I began a Lunch and Learn series at my office where employees could share skills or interesting topics with each other. I also started a blog where I could write about things I was learning. These small changes had a big impact. Not only did I feel more fulfilled, but my increased engagement and energy started to show in my work. Eventually, these side projects led to new opportunities within my company that aligned more closely with my interests and strengths. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but a gradual evolution towards a more joyful and meaningful work life. The key takeaway here is that designing a well-lived, joyful life isn't about making dramatic changes all at once. It's about becoming more aware of what truly energizes and fulfills you, and then finding ways to incorporate more of those elements into your life. It's about seeing your life as a creative project that you're constantly refining and improving. As we wrap up this key insight, I want to leave you with a powerful question that Burnett and Evans pose in the book. Are you living the life you want to live, or the life you think you should live? This question cuts to the heart of what it means to design your life. It's about moving away from external expectations and societal definitions of success, and towards a life that's authentically yours. So, I challenge you, listeners, to really sit with this question. Are there areas of your life where you're living according to shoulds rather than your true desires and values? What small changes could you make to bring more joy and meaning into your daily life? Remember, you're the designer of your life. You have the power to shape it in a way that's fulfilling and joyful to you. As we come to the end of our journey through designing your life, let's take a moment to recap the key insights we've explored and discuss how you can start applying these principles in your own life. First, we talked about the power of reframing dysfunctional beliefs. We learned that by challenging our assumptions about careers, success, and life planning, we can open up a world of possibilities. Remember, you don't need to have it all figured out, and there's no single right path. Your task is to design a life that works for you, not to conform to someone else's definition of success. Second, we explored the concept of prototyping your life. Instead of agonizing over big decisions, try creating small experiments to test out your ideas. This approach allows you to gather real-world data about what you enjoy and what works for you without having to commit to major life changes right away. Finally, we discussed the importance of designing a well-lived, joyful life. This involves aligning your work with your values, incorporating more play and energy-giving activities into your daily life, and striving for work-life harmony rather than perfect balance. So how can you start putting these ideas into practice? Here are a few actionable steps you can take. 1. Examine your beliefs. Take some time to write down your beliefs about careers, success, and life planning. Are there any that might be holding you back? Try reframing them in a way that opens up more possibilities. 2. Start a good time journal. For the next week, keep track of your activities and note when you feel most engaged and energized. Look for patterns and think about how you could incorporate more of these energizing activities into your life. 3. Design a life prototype. Choose one area of your life or career that you're curious about exploring. What small experiment could you design to test it out? Remember, it doesn't have to be a big change. Even a small step can provide valuable information. 4. Reflect on your work view. Take some time to think about your philosophy of work. What role does work play in your life? What defines good or worthwhile work for you? Understanding this can help you make decisions that align with your values. 5. Incorporate more play. Identify one activity that brings you joy simply in the doing of it. How could you incorporate more of this into your weekly routine? Remember, designing your life is an ongoing process. It's not about getting it perfect on the first try, but about continuously learning, adjusting, and growing. The beauty of this approach is that it takes the pressure off having to make one big, life-defining decision. Instead, it's about making a series of small choices that gradually move you towards a life that feels authentically yours. As we close, I want to emphasize that while the ideas in this book are powerful, the real magic happens when you put them into action. So I encourage you, I challenge you, to take at least one idea from today's episode and try it out in your own life. Start small, be curious, and see what you discover. Before we go, I want to remind you that if you found value in today's discussion, you can dive deeper into these concepts by reading the full book. You'll find a link to purchase Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans in the episode description. And remember, your life is not a problem to be solved, but a creative adventure to be designed. You are the designer, and the possibilities are endless. So go forth, prototype courageously, and design a life that brings you joy, fulfillment, and meaning. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of designing your life. Until next time, keep reading, keep learning, and keep designing the life you want to live.